Welcome to another journey aboard the Nautilus, this time as we take off into the universe of the stars to study our own sun and our own solar system. We may wonder what this has to do with mystic Christianity and things like that, but I do want you to know that we are caught in a kind of a pattern of ignorance and unknowingness of how to combine the scientific theories of today with our religion of today. Not all of us, of course, but certainly many people. And we do have this situation that we have to understand this nature of the universe in order to understand why we're human and why God brought forth the human race. You know, that's a very difficult thing to explain, primarily because it's so simple. God gave us to ourselves, and it isn't that he needs us. He didn't bring us forth to serve him. We serve him because we love him, and we want to do something for us, for him, and we want to do our part in our own solar system and our own part upon Earth, so that we can hasten the coming together of a world family. But he brought us into being because of a love that is so great that it cannot be defined by human words. I think sometimes how restricted I really am when it comes to trying to explain the nature of God. I don't think I'm the only one that's had that problem. I think that has existed with everyone who has tried to explain the nature of God, because he is so magnificent and so vast, and he is everything. And of course, when it comes to wisdom, he is the author of all of the great books, because those that reach oneness with him or union with him are the ones that left for us the great works like Plato and Socrates, Nostradamus, Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Beethoven, Einstein, Cousteau. All of these people are people who merged in cosmic consciousness, and they are the authors of the works that has been left for us to study. They are the very basis of our studies in college, in mathematics and physics and science and medicine. God's plan is at the basis of everything. And people ask, what is his plan? And I say, well, it's so simple, because in the very beginning he created the universe as it will be. I mean, it's a prototype. So its destiny and end is absolutely finished, so that we cannot help but become great and become perfect. We cannot help but fulfill the role that we're supposed to fulfill. And that he gave us to ourselves. He brought all this into existence because he loves. And it is so intricately simple, and yet somehow so difficult for us to understand and to explain. I think of him in contemplation or meditation, holding that perfect plan of the universe within him at all times. It's from this understanding that we developed meditation techniques that would take us to oneness, because we knew that if we could get to oneness, if we could surrender this lesser self that we have and go on to oneness, then we would be everything. And we would know everything, or at least have the capability of knowing everything. I'm not saying that our brain is big enough or vast enough to know everything. Our brain is just simply not as vast as the universe, the universal brain, if we want to call it that. So until our minds and consciousness and brains are that vast, we cannot know everything. I remember in some of the research work I did on Jesus' life when he said, "Truth is in God alone. Unto no one is given the whole of the truth, but to each according to their level to understand." So this means that truth is truth. The plan is the plan. It is the basis of every dream. That means that we dream the same dream. But that filters down through the regions of the subconscious mind, layer after layer after layer of ideas and concepts that we have formed in our journey through this world of matter. So as we keep all this in mind, we want to develop that oneness, and we want to understand. So there's a strong correlation between an understanding of the nature of the universe and Christian mysticism, because Christian mysticism is derived also from Hebrew mysticism, and the mystical teachings of Hebrew are absolutely in perfect harmony with science today. And we're talking about the cosmogony of Moses. The original Hebrew, as it was in Moses' native tongue, has laid out everything exact. And science correlates with it perfectly today, even though the cosmogony of Moses was established, Genesis was established centuries before Jesus walked upon earth, and before we had what we know is mystical Christianity or mystic Christianity. You see, there's always been two teachings. One is taught to the outer masses, and the other is taught inwardly through both revelation and through a teacher whom revelation has already occurred. So as we pursue this, then, we have to study creation. We have to understand what happens to us. Then we can go back to our scripture and we will perceive them at a higher level than what we perceived them before. If we close these things off and we remain closed-minded, then we shall remain bound to death, old age, pain, sorrow, suffering, jealousy, anger, and hatred. And we don't want that to happen. So let us be brave and enter into the universe of the stars. We have put over here on the board a chart that's easier than having me draw it, and really much more remarkable. We see down here our sun and our basic part of our solar system, as we might look over here at certainly at Mercury and Venus, Terra, our beloved Earth, when we can see that by comparison to our big brothers and sisters, we're pretty small. And it also behooves us to understand that there might be more planets in our solar system, some perhaps so far out that we are not aware of them yet, others which have not yet been born from the sun. Our sun is not going to die yet for several million years, and so in that time there can come forth other planets. Apparently, though, these planets that have been born here, these four, are really very tiny by comparison to the larger ones that have come along. We can say Pluto, of course, over here is a very tiny planet. And many people believe that Pluto has a very profound effect upon us here on Terra or Earth, but it doesn't really. It's so far out in the solar system that it does not have near the magnetic pull or the effect that our larger planets have, which are both closer to us and much larger. Our sun expands and contracts. Science has always called it expansion and contraction, and I'm all right with this, except that I found out that everything breathes. Our Earth breathes. That expansion and contraction is really the breath of our Earth, that our Earth is a living organism. Our sun is a living organism. It must draw from the outside cosmo whatever is necessary to sustain its life, to sustain that fire that feeds in everything that it gives birth to. So it also, in the process of this expansion and contraction and breathing, does give birth to planets. And long ago I knew that it was a probability that there was another planet so close to the sun that we couldn't see it. And I was on a United States lecture tour one time when I was doing a show, a radio show, at a radio station in San Francisco. And we were actually doing the taping on the roof. And my moderator was tremendously excited because they had just discovered another planet. He said they named it Vulcan, and that it could be photographed during an eclipse of the sun. Now, I haven't heard a great deal about Vulcan since that time, but of course I haven't studied astronomy intensely either. I am not knowledgeable, or do I claim to be knowledgeable in the art of all of the nuances of astronomy, or in all the nuances of astrology, but I know how creation began. I know how our sun gives birth to planets. All these things were shown me because I was shown the beginning of creation, the divine plan of God, to its ultimate fulfillment, and particularly the ultimate fulfillment of earth. We are so magnificent when we finish the work that has been given us to do, that all of you out there rejoice and reach for the stars, because I'm going to tell you right now, whatever you dreamed of being, whatever hope you've ever had, nothing is too high to reach for. So one by one, our planets actually were born. It is sometimes, as we might understand it in an explosion, that there might be two planets or two masses that come out together, or a piece of one may break off and start forming. And by this I'm talking about, for instance, our moon is not actually a planet, but it's a round orb that flows around our own planet. So whether it was a part of our planet in ancient times, or whether it was a piece that came out from the sun at the same time that our planet did, but it has been given credit for making life possible upon Earth, because the pull and expansion of its gravity field is thought to fertilize the seed of Earth. And I can't tell you whether that is true too, but more likely it is, because it was taught by someone that was much, I'm not going to say so much more knowledgeable in the creation of the universe, but more knowledgeable for their time in the planting and the harvesting of the crops. And I'm talking about Zarathustra, the great Persian sage that lived over 6,000 years ago. But anyway, we have here the birth of our planet, and the thing that happens is everything is in motion. Since God's divine plan is in a forward motion like this, that means every planet is going to move or turn. And it is by this turning that solidifies the mass and begins to form the planet. So as the sun gives birth out of itself, what exists first, our Earth, was nothing more than sunlight. We even know today that the core of our Earth, or the center of our Earth, is nothing other than molten fire, or molten gases and ethers. And of course that's why we shift. In other words, we have earthquakes and the land shifts, and I don't know how many of you know this, but we're also sinking. The edges of these kind of cliffs here on our planet. We've built these great cities on the edge, loving the water, of course, like San Francisco and Los Angeles and Seattle, Washington. So I understand that we're sinking at the rate of an inch or so per year, because the shelf that these are built on can't always withstand the weight of the city that has been built upon it. But we're not going to have to worry about that for a very long time. But what we do concern ourselves with is back here in the very beginning of time. Earth was nothing but sunlight, and the shifting of the masses is the core of our Earth today, and it creates the problems that we have. It's settling and cooling and hardening, expanding, breathing, because our Earth too is a living organism. So if it's constantly going to breathe in and breathe out, drawing in its nutrients from the sun and from the outside space of our solar system to feed itself, then it must also expel that which is non-essential for growth upon its surface. So thus our planet, flowing out into space, was once upon a time as close as Mercury to the sun. And as it flowed into the cold outer space, begin an orbit around the sun. And the reason it begins an orbital pattern around the sun is because the sun is turning also. Everything is in motion in this ever-expanding universe. So as the sun flows, as the Earth flows around the sun, it moves in a pre-established orbital pattern. Simply by the motion of the sun, the speed of the sun, provides what would be called very similar, I'm always saying it's very similar to a centrifugal force in the sense that you put a pail of water here and you put a piece of wood in it, and then you begin to swing the pail, and gradually that piece of wood that was in the center will move out to the outer edges of that pail as long as you keep it going. Well, the same thing kind of happened here, is that the sun being in motion is going to cause everything to flow around it. And as it flows around, it's going to move further and further and further out. So this means that whatever it was in the very beginning when it was in the position of Mercury, it can't be today, because it has produced now a third-dimensional life, and we know Mercury is much too hot to begin to form life as we know it here upon Earth, and so is Venus still considerably too hot. I think we're missing a vast experience when we don't look at some of the things that have been done by astronomy. For instance, astronomy now has been able to take us back to 10 to the minus 43 seconds, which is a fraction of a second after the universe came into existence. And we know now it didn't take 7 weekdays, as commonly believed, but that we're passing through 7 epochs, and that we're only in the 6th epoch of our own creation, and that we are gradually today moving into the 7th and what will be the final epoch of human evolution and progression. Once we have completed the 7th epoch, we will have no need of bodies of matter. And so then we will move into a higher dimension, if we want to call it, or a higher plane, but I look at it as a higher vibrational frequency, invisible to us here in the world of solid matter, as it is today. Thus our planet, now exposed to the cold outer atmosphere, is going to begin to harden and to gather together the substance to create a suit of clothes. Just as we dress to keep warm, so must this mass of sunlight draw to it a suit of clothes to protect it. So our planet began to develop the Earth's surface. So remember, the first day of creation was light. From light came the world of matter, as light spun into the cold outer space. And of course, what helped to cool it is when you take something that is that hot and something that is that cold, it's going to produce rains. Now, of course, with the help of science, we know what the Venusian rains look like. So we can pretty much judge how we must have been when we were back in the pattern where Venus is today. And you might want to question this, because you see, back in not so long ago, actually, within the last 2,000 years, it was conceived by religion that our Earth was the center of the universe. And therefore God created our Earth in 7 weekdays. Out of the 150 billion galaxies, everything spins around Earth. And so that is why he was able to put his only son on this one single planet, because it was a special planet built in 7 weekdays. Copernicus and Galileo, of course, suffered pitifully because of their concept that we rotate around the sun, rather than the fact our sun and all other planets and the universe is rotating around us. However, we know from science today that God, and by our knowledge of God too, who is this consciousness of this universe, that he would not create one planet greater than another any more than he would create one human being to be greater than another one. He created and brought forth all the suns that are in it known existence. That is not to say that new suns are not being born and that old suns are not dying or becoming something else. Nothing dies, becomes something else, and we're not quite sure what that something else is, but thanks to the relationship with the consciousness of God, or cosmic consciousness, long before science discovered there was light in the core of the black hole, I knew that there was. That the sun, who had started the spiral that created the black hole, had to be such a nucleus, or nuclei, such a nucleus, and so intense and concentrated that it still had to be there. And of course, I believe, it's my understanding now that, sure, yes, indeed, they found light in the center of a black hole. So is that to say that our universe, as we call it, the known universe, is the only universe of the stars? We don't know. Perhaps beyond our universe is a universe that is more subtle and invisible to us here. We do know now that that space, when we look between the stars on a summer's night or a clear winter night, that space is not empty, but filled with millions and billions of stars called blue stars, so distant from us that we cannot even see them. So who is to say there's not a universe that is beyond the one that we have? I do not know, or rather should I say, I cannot prove to you, I know, but I cannot prove to you that our planet is on a phase of progression and that once upon a time it was where Venus was. However, because of the consciousness of God and being shown his divine plan, I have forever been shown life on other planets. This means that I was shown Venus as it will be one day, that sometime in the far distant future, millions of years from now, it will be in a position to produce human life. I was shown two very tall individuals wearing skins, living in caves and with jungles, very much as our own planet was in the very beginning. I also was shown that there is life on other planets in our solar system. We cannot see it because it is a higher vibrational frequency. That civilizations out in our solar system are more advanced than we are. We land there, but we look with human eyes, or we look with equipment that was built for the human eye to be able to see. But if we could speed up our equipment to pick up a much higher and more subtle vibration, it is quite likely and probable that we would see existing life upon other planets. At least it is a strong possibility, because I remember so strongly when I was a young man came and wanted to meditate one day, and I was very busy and didn't particularly want to, but I have always tried to make it a rule that God is first, man is second, and me last. So I felt this person wanted to meditate, and I owed him the obligation to sit down and to meditate with him. And I have never given up a part of myself that somehow or other I'm not rewarded 100 times over. As I sat down, I just closed my eyes when a voice said, "I am Gotumi from the planet of Neptune." And he began then to show me the mysteries of how light ships were sent forth. And I call them light ships because science has not yet caught up with the fact of how light can draw to it from the gravity ions and electrons and neutrons to make something solid. So it appears that if we are truly visited from outer space, that these instruments or unidentified flying things can solidify themselves once they hit the atmosphere of our own Earth. And of course would seem to dematerialize as it leaves the ionic atmosphere of our own world. Anyway, I was so fascinated with this that I asked him if he would show me the downtown streets of Neptune. And he interjected them or projected them into my mind as though I were watching a slideshow, and I realized that we here on Earth are indeed in our infancy, and that the planet of Neptune is a planet of love so much greater than we can, we can imagine it, but so much greater than we have developed here upon Earth. Technology that is so far beyond the range of our range here upon Earth. Oh, my friends, we have such an adventure ahead of us, and we have thousands of years to live it. So I can assure you that the world is not coming to an end immediately, but it will be thousands and thousands of years when we have fulfilled the divine plan, our part of the plan, and have been able to move on into a higher vibrational frequency. Interestingly enough, our bodies, as we will have them in tomorrow's world, will not be the same as they are today. And just about the time we were preparing to move into the seventh epoch, or a final epoch of creation, from human to divine, we find that the dietary plans are changing for the human race. We cannot, when our planet is further out in space, we cannot live upon the same food that we have lived on when we were in more primitive states. So we are now changing even the way we eat, which is changing the vibrational frequency of the body. And when we get into health and nutrition, and we're going to do health and nutrition only as it is applicable to the transformation of human to divine, or the transmutation of this organo-vegetative system. In other words, refining the human body so that we can bear the light, so that we can merge with the light, and we can become less dense and never again have to wear a suit of clothes which is as dense as the ones that we wear today. So life on Venus, as I was shown, was as we were once upon a time, except God never duplicates himself. We know this because science has informed us that no two snowflakes are alike. So he's not going to create any two planets alike. And thus, life upon Venus is much taller, considerably taller third-dimensional life than we are here upon Earth. But nevertheless, their jungles were the same. Skins of animals, the same as we have been shown here upon Earth. So our planet's going to move day by day and hour by hour further out into space. And who is to say that time is exactly the same as it was millions of years ago? You know, for all we know, our hour may be a minute or a second longer than it used to be. But we move, we live on the planet, we die, so the result is we don't know about time changing. We hadn't created the ability to read or write, let alone clocks, up until the more recent centuries. So we don't know. But I think as we go on through time, we'll find that perhaps there's just a little bit of a tiny change. So we came then from light into the world of matter. And that means that matter must begin to create its vegetation. And I think that I'm going to have to remove the chart here, and that we are going to have to go to one of the older charts, which is actually called the Art of Asha. And I'm doing this in order to save a bit of drawing on the blackboard, so you will have a visual aid. The Art of Asha was designed by, of course, by, and I'd want to turn it the other way because we want the forces of light, not the forces of darkness, here where we can see them the best. The reason that I brought out Asha is to show us that when God brought forth our planet, as he brought forth our universe, it is light and dark. And we probably can pin Zarathustra to the cause of creating a Satan or a force of darkness or evil that is contrary to the path of light. But there are not two forces. There never was, there never will be. It is simply that light is the creation. In it is the part, contains the part which is untamed. For instance, if we looked at opposite of sun, it is darkness. But what is darkness? Does the sun quit shining when it's night? No. Darkness is merely the absence of light. As our planet turns in its orbital pattern, we move out of the peripheral vision of the sun, if we want to call it that, and therefore it ceases to be daylight. It becomes night. But that doesn't mean the sun still didn't exist. So we can say darkness is opposite, but does that mean that night is evil? What is there in night that can be evil? It's no different than day, except that our planet is not any longer within the radiant rays of our sun. Darkness, and how can we overcome darkness? By light. If we didn't have sunlight to strengthen us, because our bodies are 2 elements of hydrogen, 1 of oxygen, that means our body is part sunlight, is sustained by light, it is fed by light. Even in a room, even when we cannot get out into the sunlight itself, the room is still filled with minute light particles. We call it daylight. And we are still fed and nourished by this light. So to overcome weakness, of course, what are we going to do? We're going to think in terms of the power of the sun and be a very powerful force, and it will overcome weakness. We have seen this chart in other programs, so I'm not going into the art of Asha because it belongs to other programs and also to ancient wisdom. I simply wanted to show you that the way the universe was defined back long ago was defined as light, creating within it or having within it that part which is untrained, meaning that it is like a child which has not learned to walk. And as light, that part of light that is in us seeks to overcome the obstacles of light. We become more and more light, and ultimately darkness is eradicated. So it was always, this was called the macrosm. And our soul is the same way. It came forth in the beginning with all of the things it had to learn. What it had to learn is the darkness within the soul. And as the soul, which possesses the great light of God, moves forth and grows and overcomes its weaknesses, then there shall be no darkness. There can be no Satan or no Antichrist, because then the soul will move its body, its emotions, and its feelings in complete harmony with the movement of cosmic order or God's divine plan. Asha means movement of cosmic order. Movement of cosmic order is the movement of God's divine plan, moving forward always. This means nothing tomorrow can be the same as it is today, because everything is moving out, everything is expanding, everything is changing because of this. Our earth cannot be tomorrow what it is today, because every day, every hour, it's moving further out into space. And one day it will occupy the position that Mars now occupies. And will the people of Venus look up and say there is no life upon Earth? Well, I don't know. I hope we're not here to find out. If we might take that on the humorous side at the moment. Well, there we go for our first solar system crash. And we're going to put this down for just a moment. Take this really beautiful picture of our solar system away, and so that we can once again go to our blackboard. And we want to do this because we want to show you, and I'm going to pull my chair over a little closer here for the moment. We want to show you what a prototype is. Here's light, and we're going to draw rings around this light. Actually, we're going to draw 7 of them to represent the 7 epochs, or 7 days of creation, as we have come to look at them. And by the way, if you doubt 7 epochs and you want to hold to 7 days, then you go read the original Hebrew of Moses, and you will find that he talks about epochs. He does not Actually, he talks about the plan a lot more than he talks about the manifestation of the plan. And you will find that he correlates perfectly with the 7 epochs of creation. So we have, let me see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll have to draw a couple more here so that we can understand this just a little bit better. And one more, and we're ready to go. This is the way Earth was before it began. This meant that this light would gather together the substance and would, to create a suit of clothes, and it would flow through the totality of the 7 epochs of creation. So the first thing it did was to collect to it substance that created a suit of matter. So we went from light to matter, from light to, we can almost call it darkness, because we went into unknowing. And by the way, this is where the fall of Lucifer came in, because we were light and we were apart. Now, try to imagine that all of us, every single man, woman, and child, every animal and every creature that exists on earth existed here simultaneously in a potentiality, not a reality, but a potentiality, so that this is the light manifestation. So light becomes matter, and of course that's why we, being light, descended into the world of matter, called the fallen Lucifer. Terrible name for really nice people, isn't it? But it means we descended into the world of darkness and unknowingness, because once we were cloaked, even our potentiality, once we were cloaked with the heaviness of matter, we would not know who we were until the 7th and final epoch. And then from the world of matter, of course, light then being day 1, light. Then the second day, the matter, and then matter began to build upon itself all kinds of things, flowers, trees, oceans. We're not going to go into a great art program here, because one thing I haven't studied is art this time, so don't expect any great masterpieces. But we have the oceans and the flowers, and we have, oh yes, drawing backwards a little bit here, but mountains, rivers, lakes, all of these things. Once we began to build the suit of clothes from matter, which was actually vegetation, and vegetation was an offshoot of the coming together of light, or sunlight, and the cold outer atmosphere. And as the rains came, then life could begin. And it is said that when life began here upon earth, it didn't even exist long enough sometimes to reproduce itself. Of course, it was single cell. And this is going to be very important to us here next week, as we take a look at how we became human, and what I consider to be the most difficult part of what I teach. By the way, I've been teaching this course on initiation for 30 years, so I feel quite comfortable with it. So we have the world of vegetation. Once there is food upon the surface of the earth on day 4, then of course came forth fish and fowl. Let's see, I think we're light, matter, vegetation, fish and fowl. I may have put too many rings up here, but we can always erase one. And I put fish and fowl about the same time, because we're going to take a look at a time chart here that's going to show us the progression of civilization in a little bit different way. And there's not a tremendous amount of distinction in the time between fish and fowl. If we were to follow the evolution, it means that light that was beginning to develop individually began to seek, let us say that life in the sea, in water, began to stretch out for land. And as it did so, it created a form that would enable it to walk on land, so that its natural selection, if we might put it that way, was actually being drawn to the earth itself, and that it would mate with its like. Others, well, I'm not going to get you confused at the moment. I'm not confused, never. We're going to take it up next week. We're not going to take it up this week. So I will explain that much more fully and more carefully than what I have just done. And so fish and fowl, anyway, it wasn't such a time span between the two of those before they began to appear upon earth. And from fish and fowl, we went into the world of animal. And there was quite a bit of time that went between the creatures of the sea and the birds that reached for the trees in this new world that had come into being before there was animal. And of course, animal progressed through, every progression is through many, many, many stages. So I put some little rings here indicating that, of course, we know that Brontosaurus is extinct now, but domesticated dogs and cats are not. And we still have some animals such as lions and tigers and giraffes, but a lot of those are in zoos. And the jungles are being depleted, disappearing gradually off of the surface of the earth, which provides the preconditions for animal life. So then the sixth day came forth man. And so this means that all these things existed long before human life walked upon the earth. And this is why it is said that 666 is the sign of the beast, meaning that the body, the soul is bound to the sixth epoch. The spirit in it is bound to the sixth epoch, one being body, soul, and spirit. Everything, the three parts that are all bound, spirit and the soul and the indwelling Christ, all bound to the sixth level of matter. And until it moves from matter or human into divine, it remains thus bound to matter, the sixth epoch of creation. So we can take away that horrible connotation of the beast, because I don't look at human man as beast. Back about 10.5 million years ago, long before the Africanus Australopithecus, I would have to say we were pretty beast-like in our nature. We fought, we warred, we acted pretty much like the animals did themselves. But we're not that anymore. In fact, you might be delighted to know that science doesn't even call us any longer Homo sapien, because it seems that we have outgrown that also. And only once have I heard the new name that they have given us, and you know, it's one of those intricate things that I cannot remember and cannot pronounce. After all, it took me a long time to learn to say Africanus Australopithecus. So you'll have to give me more time to find out what our name is, as we have risen from Homo sapien into the world of a more advanced state of civilization. So we are at this gateway, moving into the seventh and final epoch of creation, which will refine man, and actually seven from human to divine, human to angels. We've always thought that angels were some kind of a being that was created for God to watch over man. But every angel has been human. I consider communication with the world of angels as natural as drinking a glass of water. I can hear them speak as clearly as I can hear a human speak. And every one of them has been human at some time or other, as we will one day be an angel. So we have only to work diligently to finish our work here on earth, and then maybe we can go on and become an angel too. We'll take a look at that also, and probably will not get too deeply into that until next week. But nevertheless, we have a gateway here, and we are now moving into the seventh and final epoch. And the next 2,000 years are going to be years of purification. We started this about 250 years before we hit the new millennium. It has brought out everything that is inside of us that is junky. Our drugs have increased, our ways that we have begun to change. It's hard sometimes to tell masculine and feminine. I don't take any offense at that, because the soul is neither male nor female. And once upon a time, and this was in the Gospel of Thomas also, someone asked, said, "Let Mary leave us." And Jesus said, he said, "Because Mary is not worthy to be taught." And Jesus said, "All women who become as men shall enter into the kingdom of heaven." He also said in the Gospel of Thomas that when male was no longer male and female was no longer female, they would enter the kingdom of heaven. And this would be the logical thing for him to say, primarily because the soul is neither male nor female. So as we're approaching and moving out of this distinction of male and female that brought us through human evolution, we are ceasing to be either one, becoming much more of an androgynous person. And angels are androgynous, complete unto themselves, because they have united with the spirit that is in them. We can say they have united with the Christ. The soul has become one with the Christ, and in becoming one with the Christ has become one with God. Therefore, the Christ, or that indwelling light, has always been looked at as masculine in the great schools of antiquity, and the soul has been looked at as female. This means every soul that lives on the earth is a female counterpart of the great spirit that dwells in it. And one day these two shall come together in holy marriage and become one. And in doing so shall be androgynous, neither male nor female. And so as we have moved into this more advanced age, we have found that many things are changing, including this. We have only in the last 100 years developed the power to read and write. I mean, mass consciousness could read and write through the centuries. Mass consciousness has not been able to read and write through the centuries. In fact, 2,000 years ago, knowledge was considered one of the gifts of the Holy Spirit. Now, literacy has become more the focus of mass consciousness itself. This opens up to us the storehouse and reservoir of books that have been written about everything since the beginning of man's literacy. No one needs to remain uneducated. Once they have learned to read, even if they are too poor to go to college, the libraries are filled with books that we could neither live nor read in a lifetime. It is just a matter that we need to discipline ourselves, or decide, I think, is the most important thing, what we want out of life, what we want to be, and where we want to go. But right now, as we step through this gateway into this seventh epoch of creation, we are last at a point where we can become anything and do anything that we have ever dreamed about. If anyone would have told me, being raised when I was poor on the farm, that my life would be this way, and that I would have the magic years of traveling all over the world, and I would never have believed it. But it was a dream in my heart. And the power of the Spirit brought, because I wanted to know God, because I wanted to see Him, that power made it possible for me to fulfill everything I ever dreamed about, and more. And so will it for you. So now what I'm going to do is we're going to a time-life chart, and we will just open the door on that as we begin to finish this program and take a look at how we must have looked. And this chart, as you can tell, is very, very old. It's been through many classrooms, and I wouldn't want to change that. If we put a new chart up, it would ruin everything. So here we are with the chart. And as I go along, if our cameraman can zero in on some of this. Actually, it is said that life began, or the first form of life began in the sea, and this was about 1 billion years ago. 1 billion years, and there was life upon this planet. Ooh, that is a long time. And as we look over to this part of the chart, we're looking at some of the very early vegetation. For instance, if we start down here, we're looking at 400 million years ago. 360 million years, and 400 million, 400 million, 375 million. And here's this kind of squat barrel-like plant 80 million years ago, 100 million years ago. This is long before there was human life upon Earth. Human life, as you're going to find, really started about, 10.5 million years ago in one form or another. So we look at vegetation as kind of being the oldest form of life, but along with it, we're not too far removed from, if we can go over here, we're only, a few million years away from a few million years between this plant life. For instance, as we go down here, we're looking at 375 million years ago. That is equal to just about this plant, which was 375 million years ago. As we move up from 375 million, well, that's the adventure that we're going to take up when we explore this world next week. I want to thank you for joining us on this special journey aboard the Nautilus, which has taken us from Earth to heaven. If you have any questions or wish to be on our mailing list, please call area code 206-362-4134. Area code 206-362-4134. Or join us on our website, Mystery School, one word, mysteryschool.org. The God in me bows to the God in you, and may heaven walk with you all week.